Hi, I'm Philip Hackett, Media Resource Officer with the Media Resource Department. And today I'm going to be having a discussion with Roland Butcher, the former cricket professional, also football coach, cricket administrator, just about everything you can think of in the world of sport. And we're going to be featuring his recently released football coaching manual. Welcome, Roland.
Thank you for that.
Well, I've had occasion over the years to mention your name to various people, and sometimes when I say Roland Butcher, people think for just a moment I'm talking about Roland Holder or maybe Alan Butcher. In fact, I've even had someone ask me if I'm speaking of the guy who is one of the West Indies cricket coaches. So now you have the opportunity to put it straight, because outside of the hardcore, so to speak, cricket community, there are those who sometimes get a bit confused. Who is really Roland Butcher?
Well, I think Roland Butcher, Philip, is a man who has, over time, I think, as you said, he became an international cricketer, but a long way from my roots in East Point, St. Philip. Obviously, I had to travel far and wide in order to make that a reality. But, I'm someone who has been back in Barbados now for some 16 years, trying to make my contribution to this island, which gave me my start in sport in the coming years. So hopefully I've got a few more years to do that, and I'm looking forward to the next few years.
You said your start in sport, but I believe that start before you actually left Barbados would have been primarily a cricket background.
Absolutely. Living in St. Philip, as you know, back in the 60s, there were very limited opportunities to do other sports. Your choices literally were cricket or track and field. I was more of a cricket person, so I really honed my skills in St. Philip at St. Catherine's Primary School before I went to England at age 13.
I understand one of your earlier coaches was the former West Indies fast bowler, Charlie Griffith. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. Charlie Griffith and Seymour Nurse were National Sports Council coaches in those days, going around to the primary schools coaching. They probably got to the school once a month, and yes, Charlie Griffith taught me how to bowl, and surprisingly, it was how to bowl leg spin. So that's something that I took certainly from Barbados. And in the early years of my career in England, I was a leg spinner who could bat. So he actually did something right.
And you moved from a leg spinner to middle order batsman, and you even dabbled with opening the batting on occasions, I understand.
Yes, I think that turnaround came about in 1970 when I went to the MCC Unprofessional as an apprentice. I was there in 1970-71, and really it was the first time that I had the opportunity as a apprentice. It meant that cricket was now your life, so you did it day in, day out. So I had the opportunity really to spend lots of time batting, bowling, fielding. So during that period, obviously my batting developed, and eventually the bowling went out the window, and it was purely batting.
Now, so far we've been talking a lot about cricket, but it is really football that is the basis of this discussion. We're going to get back to the cricket, and we're going to get back to the life and time, so to speak, of Roland Butcher. But you've just released a football coaching manual, and even before you tell us about the manual, you're probably just going to give us a hint, which would enlighten us as to how you move from being a professional cricketer to a football coach and releasing a football coaching manual.
Well, it's a very long story, Philip, but basically, having emigrated to England in 1967, leaving one environment in the Caribbean where cricket is the predominant sport that is played, I arrived in England where football was the sport being played. So naturally, as kids, you would gravitate to that. So for a period of time, I was literally playing football and no cricket. So as my cricketing career developed as well, so did my football career. So I played semi-professional football in the winters while I was a professional cricketer, because in the early days of my professional cricketing days, cricket was played April to September. And in those days, there were very few opportunities to travel overseas to play during the winter. So you had to have a winter job or winter sport. So my winter sport was football. So I played football in the winter and then returned to cricket in April. I did that for a number of years, and obviously during that time, not only did my player develop, but I also got into the various elements of coaching and started to do my coaching badge.
And then you came back to Barbados and you spent quite a bit of time working at the UWI, University of West Indies, in charge of the sports program.
Yes, I mean, when I came back to the university, obviously I had completed my cricketing qualifications and all my football qualifications as well. And even before that, I had worked in England in football for many years. I worked at Arsenal for 10 years as a soccer school coach. I also worked at Reading Football Club under Brendan Rodgers, the current Leicester manager, as a football coach as well. Brendan Rodgers was someone I met while I was doing my UEFA B license. We did it together. He was a young man who retired from the game very early because of injury, was taken up coaching as his new career. We met on that course, got on really well, developed a good friendship, and I think our ideas were pretty similar. And then following that course, probably a year later, I got a call from him saying, "Listen, I've just been appointed as Academy Director at Reading Football Club. I would like you to come and work with me as a coach." And I did. So I went and worked with him as a coach, an academy coach, ran my own team at Reading Football Club until he was eventually taken to Chelsea by Jose Mourinho. And I was there for a while and then moved on back to cricket. I went to Bermuda as national coach.
I think you also had the responsibility of supervising a number of other coaches during some of those football stints as well.
Absolutely. As when I started at Arsenal, as I said, I was a coach, but then I developed to being someone who actually was in charge of a number of soccer schools. So I ran all the soccer schools on behalf of Arsenal Football Club in Hertfordshire, in Buckinghamshire, in Berkshire, also down in Devon, Cornwall, etc. So there were several areas that I looked after for the club, and in that it meant that I had to look after 30, 40 coaches. So I then really looked after those coaches, and we just traveled around the country doing these courses.
So basically, your stint in England prepared you for your UWA experience, not only in terms of your playing professionally in football and in cricket and a semi-professional exercise, so to speak, in football, but in terms of leadership and administration, because you then came and you were in charge of the UWA sports program and had some pretty good results.
Well, absolutely. I think the two sports were absolutely fundamental in me actually coming to UE as director of sports. I think perhaps if I was only a cricket coach, would that have got me the opportunity to take up this position? I don't know. But the fact that I had both a background of cricket and football, I guess prompted Professor Beckles to ask me to come and head the sports program here. As you know, before 2004 when I arrived, there wasn't really a sports program. Sports was run by the Gilder students. So really, I was the first sports director here with a very clear mandate to professionalize the game and professionalize sports, not just cricket, but sports in general.
And how successful do you think you were in doing that?
I think it was absolutely very successful. If you think from 2004 to this day, you will find that UEKFL in particular has dominated sports in Barbados in many sports, not just cricket alone. Obviously, cricket has been an outstanding part of it, but in all sports. And as a result of that, we have got many players coming out from these programs here, who, in many sports, who've gone on to represent their countries around the Caribbean. And obviously, a lot of them have gone on to play Test cricket, etc. And as a result of that, we've also been able to establish combined campuses and colleges in different sports. So, for me, I think my time here at UE, which was over 15 years, culminated in some very good things happening for the sports program here, and I expect that it will continue for many years.
So you had a pretty successful stint at UWI, and now you have decided to put all that experience in writing, so to speak, to the benefit of others, and you've got the football coaching manual. What basically prompted you to get involved and actually put pen to paper?
From my time in England in football, I had started thinking about producing a coaching manual. Having come to Barbados in 2004 and then taken up this administrative position here at the university, I think it really diverted my attention from completing this assignment. So obviously I was busy with other things. So towards the end of my time here, I felt it was time to put this thing to bed. And also during the period of 2004 and 2019 here in the Caribbean, I got to see obviously firsthand what was happening within the football space in Barbados and throughout the Caribbean. So it became even more relevant that I completed this document so that it can be used in the Caribbean to help assist the football players in this region to reach international level.
What satisfies you most about the document, the manual?
I think what satisfies me really about this document is the fact that, one, as a cricketer, nobody would expect a cricketer to produce something like this. And it really shows that, you know, as a person myself, I'm a sports person. I'm not necessarily just a cricketer. And these two sports are sports that I love and sports that I believe that I can make a contribution to. So to actually design and produce something like this that I believe will be of great assistance to all football players, whether they're in primary schools, secondary schools, colleges, etc., in Barbados and throughout the Caribbean, you know, that gives me a lot of satisfaction.
You said throughout the Caribbean. How is the book going to be made available, and what are your plans to ensure that the use of the book is really maximized?
Yeah, the book is available all over the world. It's an e-book, so it's on many e-platforms. Obviously, the publishers, UB Press, who have obviously published this manual, they're the ones at the forefront of the marketing of this manual. And really, while it says Caribbean, and the name of the book really is Achieving Excellence, Caribbean Soccer Culture Manual. You know, while it says Caribbean, this manual really is useful in football all around the world. Primarily, obviously, it was written for the Caribbean because I had that in mind to develop our sport in the Caribbean. But as I said, it can be used all over the world, and it's on many platforms.
You know, you're talking about the Caribbean, and I remember reading some comments from Sir Hilary Beckles about the manual and his own views in terms of the natural talent that exists in this region, and converting that talent to something more substantial, converting that talent to success. To what extent has that motivated you?
Well, that's the motivating factor, really. The fact that I see the Caribbean, as you said, full of talent, but when you look on the world stage of football, you just don't see Caribbean people. Now, there has to be a fundamental reason for that. At the moment, we are very much spectators. Caribbean people watch football all over the world. They watch the EPL, they watch La Liga, they watch Serie A, they watch the Bundesliga, they watch football in Holland, in France, they watch football everywhere. But we're not seeing Caribbean people on the stage. So that's something really has motivated me. And I know that we have the talent in this region. And I thought to myself, you know, what is missing? And one of the real things that's missing in this region is, I think, the teaching of the sport. And not just football, but many sports. How it's taught and the gradual progressions. And I think that's one of the things that's really holding our sport back. This manual really seeks to give the coach a helping hand in developing these players so that later on down the line, you know, when you turn on your television screen, you can see a Barbadian in the Bundesliga or in England or in France or in Italy or in Holland, etc., etc.
Any plans to follow up maybe with another publication or a video of some sort?
Well, I think going down the line, it would be nice to perhaps do some videos in relation to this manual. I think right now, obviously, my hands are very full in terms of helping to promote this. At the moment, I'm in discussions with entities in South Africa and Zimbabwe, so it seems as if I'm going to be not just in the Caribbean, but beyond the Caribbean, working on this. So time may be a factor in what I do going forward. So yes, I think videos would be a good thing to follow this up with.
You know, you've had a hand in many aspects of sport. You've done commentary, you've been a cricket administrator, you've obviously done coaching, and you've been a professional player. And I believe a lot of that, as you yourself pointed out, it would have started in Barbados, and then it would have been developed in England. So let's go back to England somewhat. You got there, you were pretty much into cricket, you picked up football, but then how did you get back into cricket in terms of putting the football into second place, so to speak?
Well, basically, it was through football that I got back into cricket because, as I said, I went to England in 1967, and the craze obviously there is football. Everybody's playing football. So as a kid, I got involved in playing football. In actual fact, how I actually got into cricket, because cricket was very much put on the sideline. Our normal weekends were we would go to the local park, all friends, and we play a lot of informal football. You know, you put down some goals and you play. So we used to do that every weekend, 2 to 3 hours at a time. And it was this particular day. We had just finished our practice. It was a Sunday actually. We finished about 1 o'clock. And we used to finish around that time simply because football was on the television around 2:30 in the afternoon. And that's the time we normally leave to go home. And we were just about to leave when some guys walked onto the field and put some stumps up on the field because, as you know, the pitches were multi-use.
Mm-hmm.
And they came over to our group and said, listen guys, we're a couple of people short. Would any of you guys like to play? And the natural reaction from me and all the others was, of course not. I mean, we've been here for 3 hours. You know, we're hungry, we're thirsty, nothing to eat, we want to go home.
Uh-huh.
But one of my friends who knew I like cricket, because we discussed me coming from the Caribbean and I like cricket, etc. He said, you like cricket, why don't you play? So obviously I was very reluctant. So eventually he persuaded me to play. I went home and got a white shirt, came back, played. Didn't do anything fantastic. I think I took a couple of catches, probably got a dozen runs. And they seemed to like what they saw, and they said, would you like to play next week? So this happened to be Stevenage third 11.
Mm-hmm.
So I played the following week, and very, very quickly I gravitated into the second 11, and by the age 15 I was playing in the first 11. So really it was through football that I actually got back on the path of cricket.
And then you did so well that you became the first black cricketer to actually represent England.
Yeah, what happened after that was being in Stevenage in the first team. I also played for North Hertfordshire Schools, which was the county side. I had a stroke of luck in that in Stevenage club there was a man by the name of Cyril Hammond, who was also a big football man as well, because actually played for his club, Biggleswade as well as Stevenage. He was a very good cricketer and a football man. He then got a job at Gloucestershire County Cricket Club as an administrator. So when he went to Gloucestershire, he recommended me as a young player as someone that they should look at. So I was invited down to Gloucestershire to have trials for the youth team. And while in Gloucestershire, I would stay with Cyril Hammond and his family. And I played in the same youth team as people like David Graveney, who became the chairman of selectors for England, and Andy Stavro, who was a player. Jeff Howarth, the New Zealand captain, was in that team. So there was a whole heap of us who played in that youth team. So following those couple of years playing in the youth side, I was then sent by Gloucestershire for a trial at Lord's with MCC Young Professionals. So I went there and was accepted for the 1970 season. So I played actually 1970-71 for the MCC, same time as Ian Broken and Ian Gould. We were there together. And while at Lord's, obviously, MCC Young Professionals, they're based at Lord's. Middlesex are based at Lord's, so Middlesex obviously have the opportunity to see all the players. So they saw me and offered me a professional contract, which I started in 1972.
Then you started your test career pretty much in the Caribbean. So you came from the Caribbean, you went to England, you were selected for England for the tour of the West Indies, and lots of fuss over the hometown boy coming home to represent the opponents. What was that like, coming to Barbados, coming to the Caribbean and starting your test career, and at the same time recognizing that you were creating history?
I think before I get to that, I would probably give a little background to actually that happening. Having joined Middlesex in 72, I made my debut in 74. My first game for England was actually against Australia. That was a one-day international. You're absolutely correct about the tests. But my first game for England was a one-day international against Australia at Edgbaston in 1980. I was also a 12th man in the Ashes test in 1981, but I got picked for the winter tour of West Indies in 1981. Yes, I came to the Caribbean on that tour. First test was in Trinidad, you may remember, which I think finished in a draw. Then we went on to Guyana, where we had the infamous situation with Robin Chapman. And I believe that Guyana is where I would have made my debut.
Yeah.
Because I had been pretty good form in the games leading up to that. And I think I would have played in Guyana. It would have been a good thing, actually, because Border was, as you know, batting paradise. So yes. I would have loved to have done that. But through those unfortunate events, it meant that the test match was cancelled. And we had to come to Barbados for the next test, which would have been the third test. And that's where I made my debut. So, that was obviously fantastic, making my debut in the place where I was born. in front of all of my friends, my family who were still here, my family who came in from overseas. The overall occasion was obviously a very happy one. Didn't finish that happy with that test match because of the circumstances that transpired, I think, on day 2 of that test match. But yes,
of course, you're talking about the death of your assistant your assistant manager,
absolutely. So
the former cricketer, Ken Barrington.
The test match started fine, obviously very excited, making your debut. And yes, the reviews I got from people in Barbados and the welcome was absolutely fantastic. But as you said, on day 2, we had that unfortunate thing happen where our assistant manager, who was a fantastic guy, had a heart attack and passed away. So that really became a very sad part of that test match. So for me, I had everything in that test match. I had the good, I had the bad, and I had the ugly. So it was a strange feeling, one of elation, and then one of sadness. But I was absolutely delighted to have made my debut in Barbados.
So how did your career proceed from there?
Well, the next thing that happened was the next test match was in Antigua at the ARG. And it was the very first test match ever played in Antigua at the ARG. So then there was one more test match after that. Just remember that the second test match was actually cancelled. So Barbados became the third test match. Antigua was the fourth. And the final test match was played in Kingston, Jamaica. So I also played in that test match, which was the fifth of the series. Now, following that, went back to England. Remember, this was 1981, and it was that infamous year in 1981 where England changed 4 captains during that period. Remember, on this tour of the Caribbean, Ian Botham was captain, so he lost the captaincy when he went back, and obviously there we go, and others, and eventually McGreely came back into the fore. So 1981, after we got back, they made some changes. Unfortunately, I was one of those changes. I felt perhaps I could have been given an opportunity in the home series. It didn't pan out, and really, from there, after that, really, I really had to concentrate on my game at Middlesex.
And you ever figured that you would get a second chance to maybe make a return to the international level?
Yes, I always believed that I would make a return once I, got over that West Indian tour. As you know, in those days, West Indies were not an easy task. I mean, they were by far the best team in the world, and
that's an understatement.
But many teams struggle against them. But you must also remember that series that England, we had a pretty good team as well. We had some outstanding performances in that team as well. I mean, at the top of the order, you had Gooch Boycott, you had Gower, you had Gattin, you had Botham, Bob Willis before he got injured, Paul Downton, you had John Embry. So you had a very good team. So, so following that, as I said, went back into the English series. There were changes made in 1981 in players and in captains, etc., etc. But I really felt that, once I go back into county cricket and work really hard, that I would get the opportunity. And the opportunity, I thought, in 1983, I really felt that I would have got back into the England side because I had spent 1982 winter and the spring of 83 in Australia playing Shield cricket for Tasmania, where Michael Holden and myself were the 2 overseas players. And I had a relatively good time in Australia. Scored quite a good number of runs, and I was playing really well. So my game was at its peak, probably even before I played for England. The way I was playing. Came back to England, started the 1983 season. It was a very, very wet season. Just rain. There was hardly any cricket played. But by July, we'd only played 6 weeks of cricket in July. And in that time, I had scored 700 runs in those 6 weeks, taken 36 catches. And I was looking forward to the best part of the season because July, August, and early September really are the best times for batsmen in England. There's no question about it. It's usually good weather, pitches are dry. So I was looking forward to the rest of the season. And then one fateful afternoon, Monday actually, county game Middlesex versus Leicestershire. I miscalculated a short delivery for George Ferris from Leicester. And Antigua, a very good friend of mine, George. We were very good buddies.
Yes.
And really, it was my fault. I went to hook the short ball and missed it, played too early, and that was struck under the left eye, which caused multiple fractures. in actual fact, that entire weekend, I had been in really good form on the Saturday, and the county games started on Saturday. I got 70 odd on the Saturday. The Sunday was the Sunday game. I got 60 odd there. And then on the Monday afternoon, obviously the second innings of the county game, and I was into my 20s. I just hooked George for a couple of fours as well, in really good form. And just overconfidence caused me to play too early at a short delivery, struck under the left eye, which caused multiple fractures. My season was finished at that point. And in actual fact, it really turned out around that my international career was finished, because the result of that accident was that I had to undergo 2 very major operations, and the sight in my left eye never returned to how it was, and I didn't actually play cricket until well into the 1984 season again. I had to then reconstruct, my head position, how I played, because most cricketers, their dominant eye is their left eye, facing the bowler. My dominant eye now became my right eye, so I had to experiment with different head positions, etc., etc. So eventually got myself back into the team in 1984, and I scored a good number of runs, and I was able to continue for another 7 years as a professional cricketer, but never the same player that I was before. The injury never affected me mentally, because I was never ever scared of fast bowling, so that was never an issue. The only issue that I had was the fact that my eyes probably was not as quick as possible. You cannot play international cricket if your eyesight is not of a certain standard. So I think that really affected me, and I knew at that point, once we couldn't really do anything with the eye, because it meant that one of my eyes, the left eye, is now actually further back into my head than the right eye. And the surgeons, while doing these operations, said, listen, we can put silicone at the back of the eye to bring it forward, but there is no guarantee that it will improve the sight. So I said, no, I'm not going to have that. I will try to do what I can with the sight that I have, and fortunately for me, I was able to get 7 years more out of it.
Thanks to your wife, I understand, who provided some additional training in the evenings.
Well, not additional training. I mean, my wife was the first trainer, because after an injury like that, which is a major injury, you're left with double vision, blurred, and this is months and months after. You still got, you can't see straight, etc., etc. So obviously, I'm at home all of this time, so I would go to the local park with my wife, and she would throw balls to me to try and catch and field and eventually try and hit, etc. But it really was a long, torturous process, and she played a very big part in it.
And then after retirement, what made you decide to come back home?
Well, in actual fact, I retired at the end of 1990. I had a benefit of Middlesex in 1989, played 1 more year, and at the end of 1990, I still had another year left on my contract. My contract was not due to run out until the end of 1991. But I decided at the end of 1990, I felt perhaps, it was time that I, try to go in a different direction. Whether that was a good choice or not, I'm not sure. But I retired with a year to go on my contract. And then, obviously, I had to decide, well, what am I going to do? Obviously, I had a coaching qualification in cricket, and obviously I decided, look, I need to work even harder now at football, because if I'm going to stay in England, then for me, I needed to have 2 skills so that I can be fully employed summer and winter. So then I obviously worked at my coaching qualifications to ensure that I did that. So in the meantime, as I said, I was working with the Arsenal soccer schools, but I worked at Westminster Public School, which is probably the top public school in England. They're based in London. Fantastic ground they've got right in the heart of the city, Vincent Square. You would not actually believe that in the heart of London that there is a cricket ground called Vincent Square, which is absolutely magnificent ground. As a piece of real estate, it is absolutely priceless. And so I was at Westminster. I spent 10 years at Westminster as first team football coach and cricket coach during that period. before I then obviously worked with Reading, as I said, with Brendan Rodgers, and then after that, I got back into cricket in terms of being national coach of Bermuda, and following that, back to Barbados in 2004. I had no plans to come back to Barbados at that time because, you know, I had settled in England. I've been there since '67. My kids were born in, obviously in England, and that's where their career was going to be. And I really saw my career living part of the time in England and part of the time in Cyprus, because you know, in Cyprus we developed a very good relationship with Cyprus, and I felt that my later life we would spend 6 months in England, 6 months in Cyprus. That was going to be my future. But we returned to Barbados once on a vacation, and I had read many of Sir Hilary's books on cricket, and you know, and I also had known that his path was something similar to mine. You know, he'd gone to England around the same age as age 13. To his parents, you know, he had played a lot of cricket. He played for Warwickshire, along with Lance Gibbs and Rohan Kanai and Arvin Kalicharan and Derek Murray. You know, he played in that era as a second team county player. You know, and at Hull, you know, he was an outstanding cricketer at Hull. So I thought he would be an interesting man to come and have a chat with. So I called him up and I told him who I was, and he said, "Look, I know everything about you, and etc. etc. I would love to talk to you." And I came to Carefield here, and we had a long discussion and talked about many things. But it just so happened also that through that discussion, you know, it then came to light that, as you know, he was principal here at Carefield at that time. It came to light that, you know, he really wanted to get a director of sport in place to take sport to the professional level, because himself, in England as a cricketer and a student at Hull University, you know, he made the ultimate sacrifice once, where Hull were in the final of the British University's Cup playing at Edgbaston, and obviously he was their leading bowler. And on the same day of the finals coincided with one of his university exams. He made the ultimate sacrifice and went and played the cricket. He got 5 wickets, didn't take the exam, but his principal at Hull was so impressed with what he had done, because in those days Hull University gave a scholarship, a PhD scholarship, to the top student who got a first degree, honors degree. First. Now Professor Beckles had got a second. For the very first time in the history of the university, the principal awarded the scholarship to Professor Beckles. And he said in the speech that Professor Beckles put the university before himself. And for that reason, he was going to give him the PhD scholarship. Now, that planted in Professor Beckles' mind the fact that he believed at that point that sport and education should go hand in hand. It shouldn't be separate. And obviously he was mindful of the fact that over the years, so many people like himself who had gone to university, and even here in the Caribbean, once they got to university, they had to give up their sporting discipline because, as you know, you had to concentrate on your education. He believed that sport and education could coexist. And he was on a path to prove that and set out here at Carefield to start that process. So I really came in as the first director to start that process. Hence, 16 years down the line, that is very much the case.
So you've had a lot of success at that level, but now with your manual, what contribution do you think that is likely to make at the lower level, the secondary, the primary level, in terms of football?
For this manual, Philip, I really would like this manual to be in every single primary, secondary school, college in Barbados and in the Caribbean, because I believe, you know, this manual, I'm not just saying it because I've written it, I think people who have read it have said the similar thing, that this is really what the Caribbean has needed for a long time. So I would like to see it in all of those institutions, playing its role in developing the obvious talent that we have in this region. And as an old man sometime in Christchurch in my rocking chair, I would like to look back when I turn on my TV and I see Caribbean players playing in Serie A in England and those places, and saying that the coaching that they received in the Caribbean is something that assisted them to get there. I will have a little smile on my face when that happens.
Well, you've obviously got a vision, and as Sir Hilary would have pointed out, he said, soccer is indeed played by individuals on a field, but team glory is played at first in the mind and imagination of the coach.
Absolutely. Before you get to the players, you must get to the coaches, because the coach is the vehicle to the players. So he has to impart to the players the correct philosophy, etc., etc. So this manual also is very important for the coaches, because they too have to buy in to the concepts and methodologies in this to develop players. Now, once they do that, it becomes very easy for them to pass on to the players. And as you know, coaches play such an important role in the lives of young people. They spend a lot of time with them, they listen to them, and they hang on every word that the coach says. So basically, the coach is the first persons that we must make become the obvious carriers of this message. And Professor Beckles is absolutely right. And as you know, he's a visionary. So things like that is not said very lightly.
So you would have had great support in getting your message across, the message in terms of the manual. You would have had a lot of support from UWI.
Absolutely. The UWI Press, who are the people who have published this manual. And as a result of that, this manual is now available as an e-publication. It's on bookfusion.com, upress.com, and many other e-platforms across the world. It's at a very affordable price, Philip. It's only $15.75 US, so it's not extortionate, and it has come in very handy around this time, Philip, because as you know, during this period of lockdown, we've all had to be at home. I think it is something really that the coaches now have had the opportunity to perhaps look over, so that when football actually starts back in earnest and we get back out coaching, coursing with the players, that they can use the methodologies in this manual.
Roland, you have been blessed with many skills on and off the field. You've used them to the benefit and entertainment of others, and I certainly wish you every success as you try to use your coaching manual to create a revolution in Caribbean football.
Yes, Phyllis, I thank you very much for that. And yes, this manual really has been written with the Caribbean in mind, and I look forward to really seeing the results of this manual going forward. It's only a seed, but I want to see the trees that grow in the future.
Thanks very much, Roland. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for sharing these moments with Roland Butcher.